morning. So just thank you so much to LDO and the U.S. Embassy, and also to the other amazing speakers. I feel really honored to be here, coming from New York and really enjoying Oslo. And also your receptiveness to wanting to come together to do this work on hate speech. So I am going to be speaking on the activist perspective, and I'm aware that the word activist can mean many things to most people, so I'm going to say that we're working from the definition of activism being about caring for something, taking action, fighting for our values, and also loving and protecting each other as my definition of what activism means. So what we're going to talk about is how my organization, Women Action in the Media, was able to take on the big dogs. First big dog being Facebook. And we're a small nonprofit of grassroots organizers, mainly media makers, feminist journalists, gender nonconforming and women, people of color, who in a societal context may seemingly not have a lot of power, and systemically don't have a lot of power, but we're able to use the power of our voices and also our courage to be able to change policy within really big mammoth tech organizations. So I want to just kind of talk to you a little bit about why us, because I lived in Silicon Valley for a while. When I first met the team here from Norway, I was actually living in the San Francisco Bay Area, right next to Facebook and all these organizations. And so these are some very big corporations that have a lot of power and have a lot of influence around the world. And so the thing that makes me most proud about the work we did is that we were able to take on these corporations just as individuals and concerned citizens who cared about the proliferation of hate speech, and specifically graphic sexist content and misogynistic content that was found on the platform that their moderators were allowing to be in abundance based on what John so perfectly described as this idea that it was about free expression and non-censorship earlier, that we know is actually a silencing force because it creates a toxic community and a toxic space where those of us who are in our most vulnerable, marginalized positions are then silenced. So what happened, I'm showing this picture of David and Goliath because our story is a David and Goliath story, that we were the people who people didn't imagine much from, who were able to flex our muscle and our media expertise and prowess to be able to make this change. And when we first had this conversation at the UN, it was actually right on the heels of Martin Luther King Day. So when I first gave this presentation, I was reflecting on Martin Luther King and his words about what happens when people say enough is enough, when you fight back, you stand up. And that's exactly what happened. Soraya Shamali, who is one of our board members, is a feminist journalist, amazing human being also. And she noticed that this content was everywhere, that you couldn't avoid it, everywhere from Facebook groups to graphic images and memes that were very violent and graphic, which I'll give you a trigger warning. I'm going to show some really disturbing pictures soon, so apologies in advance. And she had noticed that during the time of the beheading videos that were also going viral on Facebook, and then and people just being really upset about them and calling for those to be taken down, why was there not the same sort of level of concern around graphic gender content as well? And so she did what one of my writer friends, Courtney Martin, calls trusted her own outrage, and reached out to her network to get Sheryl Sandberg's information at Facebook, who is a major decision maker there, and to say, Sheryl, if I have to look at this graphic content, then you have to look at these beheadings, because I've heard you speak out about these beheadings being a bad thing. And so if I have to look at this misogynistic content, then you have to look at that. And what does that mean about us having to look at this stuff? And so in trusting her own outreach, she built a coalition of people. She was contacted by my predecessor at Women Action in the Media, Jacqueline Friedman, who was then the executive director. And I was already in the network helping them organize, but in a different way. And said to her, let's work together, and also let's work with other organizations like Everyday Feminism in the UK to come together and create a coalition to take them on. And so as an independent nonprofit that's mainly based in Canada and the United States, there was a recognition that if we were going to take Facebook on, this needed to be a global coalition because there's global implications everywhere, there's different ways people are targeted in different countries, and that we also need the force of a global voice to make this change. And so one of the things that we quickly identified was that in addition to this content just being so disgusting, was that Facebook also stigmatizing things like breastfeeding by removing that content really easily. The moderators there would say, oh, breastfeeding content, that's not allowed on our platform. Reconstructive surgery, pictures of people who had mastectomies who wanted to show their cancer journeys. Those pictures, those violate our terms and standards. But pictures of women getting beat up like Rihanna's pictures or rape jokes, those are absolutely acceptable. And they were saying that that was content that could be made on platform as a version of freedom of speech and expression. So we demanded a swift and comprehensive and effective action to address this representation, that we wanted to make sure that there was a recognition that this sort of content was graphic, that was violent, and that was unacceptable. And to also point out what kind of culture are we cultivating where we stigmatize women's bodies around breastfeeding and other natural processes around women's bodies, but where we normalize rape, we normalize misogyny and pictures of women being beaten and raped and attacked, and targets of violence in general. And so that's how we came up with the Facebook rape hashtag, which was used to rally people around as an awareness builder, but also as a way to target advertisers. Because we knew that while some people might think it was cute for a bunch of women around the world to be using this hashtag and being upset about it, it wasn't going to be as effective as reaching for their pocketbook by contacting their advertisers with this hashtag and tweeting at their advertisers and the many companies that have ads on Facebook and work with them and give them tons of revenue to tweet these disgusting images to them with this hashtag. And that turned out to be very effective because while we were awareness building in our own right, we're also getting the advertisers to build pressure and to push their community, which proved to be very effective. And then every day, we were also updating on our website who the new advertisers were that we got on board. So that also upped the ante and the pressure, and the media was also building on that and retelling the story over and over. And I'm sure that was a really fun week for the people working at Facebook who had to deal with those calls. So this is the problem, and again, the pictures I'm going to show are very triggering, but I think that they're important for us to see so we can see the kind of content that was considered normal. And so this was the problem, that we had this sort of rape culture cultivating content, and this is the kind of thing that was just normal. That I would see this kind of stuff all the time too. And also, I think that the legal age for most people to be on Facebook is 13 years old. I think we know that a lot of people who are younger than 13 are on Facebook too. So when you think about what kinds of content like this can really do to a young woman or gender nonconforming person or anyone who has to come up with this content and understand who they are and their place and relationship to the world is really, really problematic and causes a lot of concern. And so this content ranged from this sort of meme that was framed as humor, and that was a part of the free expression piece that I frankly think is not funny unless you're a sociopath. So this is one of the most egregious ones that I've seen that we also used as an example. Once you go black, you tend to get raped and beaten. This is the worst one, I think, that I've seen on our site that shows a child being abused, and that this is supposed to be an example of humor and free expression. Another one making light of raping women, violence, and non-consent, and drugging them. Here's a racist group, and there are many of these that's targeting Indian women in this case, and also making the case for women asking for being raped. And this one that is also targeting pregnant women, but also putting fall on women as well for getting pregnant, and another thing that was perfectly legal under the terms and conditions of Facebook at the time. And so this kind of content was the kind of content that we were calling to question, and that we were sending the advertisers saying, is this the kind of imagery that you want to be having your ads next to? So a lot of times when we would send the images, we would actually take the screenshots of the companies that were showing these ads next to this sort of content so that they could see that this is what you are endorsing. This is the kind of content that your organizational brand is being associated with. Another one that's promoting domestic violence and trivializing domestic violence as well, and was supposed to be a humor meme, but we can all see that it's repulsive and very problematic. So how did we do this? We had a kick-ass strategy. And so what I wanted to say about that is that this took several weeks to plan. So before this project even dropped, I was a part of that coalition of people who were called and consulted on what contacts we had and everything. People were getting together, getting data, getting intel, and deciding what strategic plan we're going to do and who was going to do what. And so we've been calling it a flip the switch model in terms of turning the lights on, surfacing things, and also lighting them up, as I like to say, with our offensive. And so there was 3 major things that we did with this global strategy. Negotiations. So there was a point person who was focused on strategy around strategic negotiations with the tech industry, with the major stakeholders. Another point person who was focused on website and communications. So making sure that as each negotiation works or doesn't work, or each advertiser negotiation changes and the status therein changes, that the website and that communications and statements, those things are being updated around the clock. Because since we are a small organization and this was a global campaign, it was really hard to do that in real time because we all had different time zones around the world. So there might be people in Pakistan who were saying, yeah, we just got this advertiser to pull out here, but in the States we're sleeping. So there had to be people who were out and about working together to make sure this was a 24/7 for a couple of weeks, and there was a lot of sleep that was lost during that time. And then also social media in various time zones so that we could keep up the momentum and keep up the viral nature of this momentum, so that we would also keep Facebook on their toes at the time to make sure that this is filling their feeds as well as staying on the radar. And then getting influencers in the community to be talking about this on social media as well as in the media, in the larger media. And so when we employed this strategy, we were able to get positive results and actually push Facebook to change their policies. And when they were initially contacted, they weren't so keen on doing that. So this was a real negotiation. And at first, the freedom of speech and freedom of expression statement was what we received around the terms and conditions of service. So what did it take to make this change? 60,000 tweets, 900 emails, 1 global feminist network, hundreds of people, and over 100 signers that were helping to build this public awareness. But I also think it's important when we talk about online work that 95% of the effort happened over the phone via phone or Skype or Google Hangouts. So there was a lot of face-to-face time and relationship building that was a part of it. And I don't want people to think that everything happened because we were just tweeting and then suddenly Facebook was able to change things. That there were a lot of traditional methods and also new online feminist methods. And so I'm using this infographic as well to kind of explain how this sort of thing works. That was created by Valenti Martin Media, which is a firm that my friends Courtney Martin and Vanessa Valenti started, and they created a paper that was very controversial called Fem Future, and it was about the future of digital feminism, the future of feminism in general, and documenting online feminism and its economy in our culture. And I was one of the people that was interviewed for that paper. But one of the infographics that came out of this was this, and I was thinking about how that paper came out before this actually happened, but everything about what this infographic says about why online feminism works and why it's effective actually came true in our campaign. So it was rapid, it was consciousness raising, it was accessible, it was community driven, It was youth-led. It was intersectional, so it meant that our messaging was not just single issue focused on gender, but we were covering race, we were covering sexuality, we were covering nationality, we were covering age. And also, it was about mobilizing, and it was decentralized leadership. So there wasn't just one leader. This was about all of us having leadership and building momentum and being focused on the values instead of hierarchy. So when we were able to win, which was very exciting, we gained even more momentum and were able to change other platforms. So one of the goals, and the founder of WHAM had always said that her goal was that she wanted tech companies and media companies to understand that if they didn't do policies that were right by women and other marginalized folks, that we're coming for you. So that was our real message and clarion call also when this happened. Yes, we may be a small organization, but look what we were able to do at Facebook. And so if you don't get right, we're coming for you. And so now people know that. And we're not afraid of coming for you. So what we did after that was to go to Twitter, which was another fertile place. And I'm sure those of you on Twitter who are tweeting while women, or tweeting while not being a part of dominant culture, know that Twitter can be the wild, wild west frontier for online harassment. And so what we did was to start a demonstration project where people were able to give us their experiences. And as an authorized reporter of Twitter, we were able to get data from them about when they were harassed, what kinds of harassment they were experiencing, and to be able to get research out of that to talk about the specific example of online harassment on Twitter and gendered online harassment on Twitter and what kinds of harassment people were experiencing, how harassers were doing it, and then make policy recommendations and solutions to offer to Twitter. And so we did that. Again, lots of long-term conversations that we were having with Twitter as well. Lots of media. We got to a point with, just like Facebook, where we had more media than we could actually handle. I think with Facebook there was 300 media calls during that week that happened with a small team of people who were working on it, and we had a very similar response with Twitter. And so when we released this report, when all of our information came out, we saw from Twitter over time, over about a 6-month period, that they changed their policies around doxing, they changed their policies around cyber exploitation, or better known as revenge porn. And they also have since changed their policies around how many people they're hiring for moderators. And these were all things that we asked for in our recommendations with this report. And we were also able to see a change in their diversity indicators. So even though our research did not say anything specifically about diversity in hiring, when we were writing the resource letter and the recommendation letter, I actually put a clause in there that said, you're 72% male and you're 72% white, like most of Silicon Valley. And doesn't surprise me that maybe your understanding of online harassment could be better because you could have a blind spot to this, given your own power and privilege and your subject positioning. And so it was exciting to see just a couple months ago too that they did say, we want to do better, we want to make an effort to have more diversity in hiring. And so we claim that as a win too, because we were able to use this research to surface this conversation. And so there's some other wins that happened too. Other coalition members we worked with in our Speech and Safety Coalition, like the National Network for Domestic Violence, to end domestic violence, they were able to be really integral in the ending revenge porn piece. We were able to participate, which I thought was like a full circle part of the Facebook win. We participated in a panel at Facebook less than a year later about internet safety, which felt really awesome. When I was on that panel, I thought, wow, I can't believe they're inviting us to be at the table now, a year later, with our expertise and recommendations. We participated in an online misogyny cohort at Harvard, working with people around the world to strategize about a global strategy and plan and network. And then we also have recently started a relationship with Google and Google Ideas. And so unlike Twitter and Facebook, where we kind of had to come for them, Google came to us. And that was very, very exciting. There was one person who approached me who joined our network and actually joined WHAM as a member several months before and said that as a woman working at Google, she was very invested in this work and wanted to see what she could do. And then several other women separately reached out to me from across the country in another Google office. And so they have said, you know, with big corporations like this, it helps them when activists are surfacing these issues, because sometimes we're able to bring people in different departments in different parts of the world or different states together to have these conversations. And so we participated with a lot of folks that were mentioned in Christina's presentation, actually, like Zoe Quinn, who's in this picture also, and Anita Sarkeesian, and Anita's also a member of WHAM, to come together and have a conversation about strategy and what we needed to see, what kind of support we needed from companies like Google, and what resources we thought that they could bring to the table to help in this problem of online harassment. And what was so great about Google is that we said, you know, that public recognition that they're also working with people like us would be really important, because that hasn't been the case with a lot of the other organizations in the sense of them saying, oh, our policies have been impacted by the work the activists are doing, which is fine. We don't need that credit as long as we're getting the results. But what Google did is they actually tweeted this picture out after we came together and we were having some food afterward. And after they tweeted it, Gamergate came on in full force. It took 25 minutes. I actually was waiting on my watch. It took about 25 minutes, I think like 24.5. And we said, welcome to our world. When you do tweet this, just be ready, because they're going to come for you, all of us. And so Google was inundated with lots of hate tweets after that. And I think there were 1,000 people who retweeted at the time, or over 1,000, lots of likes. Christina and I were talking about it because she saw the melee that happened after this was tweeted. And it caused an uproar because people saw the level of power that comes with being able to influence an organization like Google and to be recognized as experts on this issue. And so that backlash, I thought, was actually a win, because afterward, Google then tweeted, wow, this backlash is actually an example about why we're committed to doing this work. You have just proven our point, and this is going to help us legitimize it. So we were really excited too, because now the people who we're working with there can talk to the powers that be and say, oh, look at our own Twitter feed now. Here's an example about why this is important work. So now, what I would like to ask of you is to think about your own activism and to think about when you've had enough is enough. What other places, because we sure, there's a lot of ground to cover. There's enough for all of us to take on a piece. This issue is infectious, like we heard from earlier this morning from the Norwegian Ombudsman. So what I'd like to offer is that there's a quote that Gloria Steinem, who is one of my mentors and friends, has said about her generation's work and what she wanted to teach the next generation, which is that power is never given, it has to be taken. And that's some of the best advice that I've ever gotten. And Beyonce Knowles, in a very different language lately, has been saying the same thing, that power is always taken, it is never given. And I wanted to juxtapose this focus on Ms. Magazine on its 40th anniversary, with Gloria Steinem being the creator of Ms. Magazine, the first glossy feminist publication in wide circulation in the United States. And then Beyonce, who was on the cover of Ms. last year after she declared herself a feminist in the public space, and kind of changing dialogue around that. And to say that we need all of us to take more power. We need to stop asking for permission, trust our own outrage, and work together to take our power back. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm back with this microphone. I hope it's not holding you back, because very few people ask questions. If it's about the microphone, I can switch. You have another one, right? Okay. You want to ask a question? Yes, I know.
Hi, thanks so much for your insightful presentation and the wonderful work that you're doing. Just coming back to the point where you're juxtaposing the two figures. Of late in Hollywood, there's been interviews that have gotten attention of some big actresses that are earning maybe like $1 million per episode, and they kind of equate feminism to just man-hating. And then there's this kind of this perception that feminism is all about getting special rights for women. I'm just wondering if you've kind of also taken up in your activism is just to simply explain what feminism is, because there are lots of, mansplaining about the term. I was just wondering if you've taken that up.
Thank you. Yes. So I get that a lot. I was talking about how my feed actually, ever since that Google picture has been released, I've been receiving so much hate mail since then, and not as bad as Zoe and Anita have received it, but it's been annoying to say, at the least, to say. And so some of the questions have been like, why should you have special treatment? You guys are clearly not suffering because you get to meet with Google. That kind of thing. That's been coming. You get special treatment because you get to be the feminist poster girls and, all that kind of thing. And so it's been really interesting. I think, it depends on who I'm talking to in terms of how I break this down, because the baseline is really important to understand when you're talking to, knowing your audience, rule number one of media. So, with people who kind of have a little bit more sophisticated analysis, who aren't the ones who tweet at me and say, bitch, go make me a sandwich, you get, those kinds of people, then I'll say it's about understanding power structures and systems, and understanding that even though those actresses may make a certain amount, that if they're not experiencing pay equity in relationship to men, that is a part of a social inequality, and that is problematic. And that has actually just come up a couple of weeks ago because we tweeted out about Sienna Miller wanting to talk about how she found out that her male co-star was getting offered more money than she was for a film. And so some men wrote on our Facebook page, well, what if those men were more qualified than she was? That's the first knee-jerk reaction. But the other way around isn't the question. And so one of the responses that we also had about that was, well, this is actually not about her. This is about a systemic problem we have in the United States where there is no equal rights amendment and there's no pay equity. We have a pay gap problem. And that it's actually controversial in the United States to have a Fair Pay Act. I've actually been invited to go on Fox News, which is our conservative channel, to talk about this with John Stossel, who's, and so it's just really interesting. I know. And so that the idea that it's not a given that there should be equity is also another reason why we have to talk to people. And then also a lot of times I just need to regurgitate the dictionary definition of what feminism is, which is the social, political, cultural, economic equality of the sexes and the genders, which I think everyone should be able to get behind in theory. But you'd be surprised how many people still believe that feminism is about hierarchy, or the one that's my favorite is, well, you believe in matriarchy, which is another one that I've gotten really often. And I think, especially, as a woman of color who does this work, I get this question in relation to the Black Lives Matter movement all the time. And people say, well, isn't it all lives matter? And then I always say, well, if all lives did matter in our country and 28 Black people, or every 28 hours a Black person who was unarmed wasn't shot in our country, then we wouldn't have to say Black Lives Matter. So I would love to live in a world where feminism was just a given, that was the way that we lived our lives, and we wouldn't have to name it. But we have to name it because being a woman has been stigmatized in our culture. And so naming what it is very important, that we can't dilute it.
Okay, I'm going to have to interrupt you there, Jamia. We have one more question before lunch.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth. Thank you for your concrete teaching about how to do the campaign. I just have one question. Are you following what different types that are trending in social media right now on Facebook and on Instagram? A lot of young people are doing the same type of rape jokes about school shootings, and Facebook and Instagram aren't taking it down at all. And it's really, really, really disturbing to see. And the jokes, they are just 10 times as sick as the things we just saw right there. Are you or other activists following up on that?
So I actually, with the shootings, I've seen a little bit of it and think it's problematic. We specifically haven't been working on that right now, but I think that if there are people who want to take that on, I would be more than happy to share our resources and contacts to help get that started. And we actually have on our website a transparent model of how we did this, the tools that we used, everything. So if you want to fire that up, then let's talk and we can help you work on that and work on it together, and we'd be happy to support.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Jamia. Okay, we have one more speaker after lunch, so please stay. Lunch is out there, but before that, let's give a hand.